I want to welcome all our viewers at home and abroad here around the world to this our program here on GlobeSpan 24/7. We want to thank Nohar Singh, who has made this show possible, and to Devin, our technical specialist, as we begin tonight's program entitled The Joiners Group. This evening, we are very privileged to have with us an icon in Guyana. He has captivated the Guyanese people so much that everyone here in New York is talking about Critic. And we are so glad that what he did to live recording, reporting, I think Kaichur did for the print media. So Critic, we want to welcome you to this program for the first time, and I'm looking forward to our audience to have a meaningful dialogue with you as they listen to your question to our guest this evening. Today we have with
Actually,
us
it's a pleasure having me here.
Today we have with us the Joinder Group. As you will know, the Joinder Group is the three parties that informed GCOM that they will pool their votes after the election for the purpose of seat allocation. With us this evening is Dr. Asha Kissoon. She is the presidential candidate of the new movement, the TNM. We also have with us Mr. Lenox Shuman. He is the presidential candidate for the Liberty and Justice Party. We'll have soon, we're trying to communicate with him, Mr. Ralph Ramkarran, who is the presidential candidate for the Liberty, for the a new and united Guyana. So viewers at home and abroad, welcome to our program. Tonight, before we start talking about the elections per se, Dr. Kissoon and Mr. Shuman, there are a lot of issues surrounding GCOM. GCOM has somehow made report, they've made it public that they were informed or recommendation by the Carter Center to close residence polling station in private residence. What they did is, the perception is that they closed polling station in what is considered to be the stronghold of the PPP areas. And they, by and large, they have left the other areas private residence. If that information is true, that they said that they got a recommendation from the Carter Center, and that is untrue, do you believe that GCOM is ready to give a free and fair election in Guyana? Asha, we can start with you.
Hello, good night, everyone. I think first of all, let me say that even though the polling stations were reduced, a pledge was made to replace 16 plus polling stations, and today some of them went up. I realized that it was an issue and seemed to disenfranchise voters in general, but in all fairness, they did try to correct it. Regardless of whatever reason, they did it in the first place. The difficulties we face as new parties is very separate from what the PPP or APNU would be facing from them, and I guess we'll be discussing that more in detail down in the show.
Okay, Mr. Shuman?
Charles, thank you for having me on the show. It's always a pleasure discussing with you. I see my good friend Critic here, obviously. He's taking Guyana by storm, and it's a pleasure to see Dr. Asha Kissoon. And I saw Ralph just came on. Just like to say a pleasant good evening to all of you. And a pleasant good evening to all the people who are watching and following us on Facebook and wherever. We have not been privy to much of the information because most of the time has been spent in the fields. And when we look at the news reports, I think there have been some news reports on the matter, and we haven't really analyzed all of it. But what I do know from the Carter Center is when they issued the report from the 2015 elections, as they said that every possible measure should be put in place to ensure that the elections and the polling are held in as neutral a place as possible. Now, if GCOM undertook to just remove those polling stations from PPP strongholds and maintain them in PNC strongholds or APNU AFC strongholds, then I would say that stinks or smells of a malicious act on their part. What I am happy about is that there have been measures taken to correct those issues, and we are hopeful that the chair of GCOM continues to operate from a position of integrity. I think the chair of GCOM is the only person that I view within the commission, not within the secretariat, but within the commission, who can execute their mandate objectively. And I think if she were to be guided by the observers and the Carter Center's report, I think that much of the suspicion that surround polling would be addressed.
And I want to welcome Mr. Ralph Ramkarran, the candidate for the new and United Guyana. Mr. Ramkarran, we were talking about the issue with GCOM and some of the perceived shenanigans, if that's the right term to use, that is going on there when they base their closing of polling stations and private residence on a Carter Center recommendation, when in fact that was not so. Do you believe that GCOM is prepared to give the Guyanese people a free and fair election come Monday?
Well, thank you very much for having me, and good evening to Asha, Lenox, and Critic. I believe that this action by GCOM casts a very great deal of suspicion on their bona fides. Why would you, at this very late stage, eliminate a large number of polling stations, which will make voting very difficult for the people in those communities, and in communities where the PPP has a majority, based on a spurious allegation that the Carter Center said in 2015 that polling stations should be on neutral ground. Now, the reality in Guyana is, the reality in Guyana is that we have always had polling stations in private residences because polling station places, public places, are not available in sufficient numbers around the country. And these private places are mixed, are in mixed communities. That is to say, they're in communities where the PPP has dominance, they're in the communities where the APNU has dominance. And why are you having polling stations removed only in the areas where PPP has dominance? I'm not defending the PPP. The PPP can make its own defenses. What I am saying is that the action of GCOM has very great deal of suspicious consequences, and it increases the tension on election day. So I listened to the news broadcast this midday. Mr. Harmon was saying that, look, GCOM has been going around with PPP officials looking at places where polling stations can be substituted for the ones which were eliminated. And he is not prepared to accept those polling stations. Well, sorry, Mr. Harmon. If you don't wish to accept it, then that's your problem. That is what GCOM should say. Unfortunately, some people in GCOM are intimidating GCOM officials. I don't want to say they're intimidating the chairperson, but they are adopting an intimidatory mood, and people in the government are doing so as well. And that does not bode well for the future. I'm very sorry to say.
Thank you very much. Before I ask Critic to come in and ask your question, just your own view. Walda Lawrence from the APNU list of candidates, she's the, I think, the chairman of that party. She told her supporters at one rally that they should get to the polling station at 5 o'clock before the close of polls. I have not heard any comment from the three of you. Maybe you did, but I didn't hear it. Is that something that GCOM should have addressed, and also the other parties? And secondly, there are reports that only the PPP had approached GCOM about all the shortcomings, and the smaller parties did not make their request known to GCOM. Is that so? And we can start with Lenox first.
Charles, yes, let me jump right in there. We have made representation at GCOM on multiple occasions, on multiple issues. The downside to that is that the smaller parties, or the three of us here, Ralph, Asha, myself, both, all three of us from a party that, or a collective that poses a threat to both political parties have not had the kind of media play that the PPP and the PNC would have. We requested a meeting with GCOM to address the very issues. We also requested clarity on the residences that were removed and the residences that were replaced, and none of that information has been forthcoming. So it seems a bit, it is a bit unfortunate that GCOM is more than ready to meet with the People's Progressive Party, Civic, and not willing to meet with the Liberty and Justice Party. I don't know if the new movement or ANOG made that request, but we have obviously made that request on a few occasions, and those meetings have not been forthcoming.
Asha, you want to come in there? Yeah.
Let me get in here and say, I'll address the first issue first. Walda Lawrence was so irresponsible to suggest to her voters that they need to watch polling stations. It was a direct instigation of violence and misconduct for Election Day. We have been saying this to our supporters, we have spoken out about it, but like Mr. Shuman pointed out, the media does not give us the coverage that we deserve. We don't stand by what she said, and GCOM should have done something. Today, I was present at the signing of Code of Conduct in GCOM, and I brought up the issue that we have requested meetings several times with them and have not gotten responses. What they said to me is they had no idea we were asking for meetings. We have proof of several emails and phone calls that we've been requesting over and over, and they pledged that they're going to have a meeting with us. There's 3 days to elections. Let's see how that's going to work out. Apart from that, specifically about the tripartite joiner, we handed in a signed copy of our MOU to them to show them how we will be going ahead as a joiner. Today, GCOM said to me that they were not aware of this and they did not see it. When we investigated and got to the bottom of it, the document was there in the secretary's office and never made it to the CEO. So right now, at this late point in time, it is being addressed. And this show that they said they're giving new parties a chance to speak to them and their doors are open is nothing more than a show, because we've been trying all the time. The new movement has also been trying, and it's falling on deaf ears.
Mr. Ramkarran?
The allegation is made by other political parties that they have been trying to meet with GCOM to no avail. So the experience of the new movement is not a unique experience. It's an experience that's common to everybody. And GCOM does not have to wait until somebody requests a meeting in order to determine the procedures which will be adopted in allocating seats. The joinder that we have engaged in, that we have formed under Section 22 of the elections law, provides does not set out any procedures as to how this will operate. And therefore, since there are no laws for GCOM to follow, GCOM should set out the procedures and invite us to those procedures. We have to agree to what they're planning to do. They can't impose anything on us because there are no laws for them to make imposition. Now, it is their duty to meet with us. We don't have to request a meeting to discuss these important matters. They need to initiate meetings with us in order to determine what procedures are going to apply. They haven't done so, and that is on them. This is a very late stage. Elections are on Monday. Votes will be counted from Monday after the election. And we know what GCOM will do, and they're not carrying out their responsibilities and their duties in a proper manner.
Thank you. Critic?
Ralph, let me jump in there for a quick sec. And Charles, there is one thing that we know, I think, and it has been operational in Guyana continuously, is that we have reactive institutions instead of proactive institutions. Take, for example, the signing of the Code of Conduct 2 days before elections, when this should have been available since December, when you identified the nomination date. And to point to the very same thing that Ralph is saying, as an institution, you know you have stakeholders. It would only be prudent to say, you know what, we have certain framework that we would like to work with. We'd like to clarify these things, and let's invite the parties to come and have a discussion. And I want to double back on what Asha had mentioned and what we requested also. Is the only reason why the People's Progressive Party will continue to have meetings with the Commission and also the PNC or APNU AFC, it is because they are represented on the Commission. And this highlights a further need as to why we need electoral reform and why we need constitutional reform to ensure that GCOM operates independent of any political directives. And we can see evidence being played out every single day.
Thank you, Lenox.
Have you made any attempt, Mr. Shuman, to have those issues addressed? You would have been meeting from time to time different observers. You would have been meeting individuals from the diplomatic community. What efforts have you made to have these kind of issues addressed? You've highlighted the fact that you realize they exist. You realize these problems exist and why they exist. What have you done so far to have these issues addressed?
At every meeting and every opportunity that we have had to discuss with GCOM, the issues were raised. Every opportunity that we had to discuss with the observers, the very same issues were raised, inclusive of a timeline and how long it would take for the tabulation, for the announcement of results, so that the country could return to some degree of normalcy. None of those things have been forthcoming. We requested the very same thing of GCOM, and that has not been forthcoming. So we have taken proactive measures in our engagements, not only with GCOM, but with the observer missions, and whatever other diplomatic forces are available to have access or maybe to have an in somewhere. We have taken those measures to have that discussion with them. But to this date, we have not seen any kind of results from those discussions.
As a result of your experience with GCOM, specifically you, Lenox, and the Liberty and Justice Party, do you feel like the issues with GCOM are more personal? GCOM, it could be said GCOM tried to derail you when there was a leak that you might be removed from the list as a result of being a dual citizen and these kind of things. Do you see that as personal, or in light of the many different issues that GCOM has, you feel that there was just some form of a mix-up?
I think to a great extent they're afraid of what the joiner really means for their political identity and their political survival. The fact that Ralph, Asha, and myself, as leaders of the party, signed that agreement to have a joiners, it poses a serious threat to them. And I think to a great extent, they're going to do everything that they possibly can to disrupt that and to derail any of the three of us. So to answer your question very forward, is absolutely, I think there is some kind of, well, I don't want to use the word capricious, but I think there is an attempt to want to derail the Liberty and Justice Party and potentially the new movement and ANOG to weaken that joiner per se, so that the people would not have the confidence in the joiner that stands to derail their potential majority rule.
Mr. Ramkarran, I have heard you say you have played a role in GCOM over the period of 3 elections. Can you give us an idea of what you think is playing out here? There's a lot of inconsistencies. I must tell you, I spoke today with Madam Chairperson, and she has given me all assurances that, they're going to be very forthcoming. The media center is going to be given information in a timely fashion. This was also told to me by Mr. Lowenfield. But there are a number of shortcomings that are still evident. Can you give me an understanding from your perspective, somebody with experience that has experienced 3 elections, I think, or more at GCOM? Can you give me some insight as to what are the problems they're facing and why these things are coming up, or if they're deliberate?
I think I was on the come for the 1992, 1997, and 2001 elections. My counterpart in those commissions were Neville December, the late Neville December, so long ago. In 1997, Malcolm Paris, and in 2001, no less a person than Robert Corbyn. So those are the people we had to deal with. And during those periods, it was the understanding of the two main political parties represented on the commission that we had to come to agreement, because if we didn't come to agreements, the elections could not be held. And the chairperson on those commissions, in every one of them, Rudy Collins, Do Not Sing, and Joe Singh, all told us when we had difficulties, comrades, agree and come back tomorrow. Agree or come back next week. And I remember Joe Singh phoning me up, pressuring me to come to an agreement. And let me tell you this, both sides made decisions which they knew their leaderships would object to. But they knew that unless they made those decisions, there would be no agreement and you would have difficulty holding the elections. And we went back, both the PNC and the PPP, we went back and took blows from our leadership because we took decisions without their concurrence. That went in all the commissions I served on.
Are you suggesting there's a need for the Madam Chairperson to be a little more forceful as it relates to the commissioners and agreements? There's a lack of forcefulness?
I don't know what goes on in the commission. I know that she can be forceful. She was a judge, and I appeared before her for over a decade or more, both in the High Court and the Court of Appeal. I know she can be forceful. What has happened, I noticed, I'm not in the commission since 2001, but what I noticed from the public engagement with members of the commission, that the suspicion and the hostility of the two sides is great and is public. It was not that way before. So that the suspicion is hampering the work of the commission, and it would, if the Madam Chair is not as firm as she should be, I think that the time has come for her to put her foot down. The Madam Chair must have known that the reduction of so many polling stations in only PPP areas would cause a problem. She knew that. The press, and as Freddie Kissoon said in his article today or the day before, that look, these press people are not pro PPP, and the fact that they have come out and said that they're upset that they're not getting information from GCOM says a lot. So I think the Madam Chair needs to put her feet firmly on the ground against those who are creating these disruptions.
Okay, I know Asha, you want to step in there, Asha, with Critic's question?
Asha, you were there at the commission today. You had a short talk with the Madam Chairperson. You presented certain things, dissatisfaction with the inability of the election commission to call you guys back, the joiners back, the three parties that are working together to use their votes wisely. And you reached out, you explained to them your dissatisfaction, the Madam Chairperson and the CEO, Mr. Lowenfield. Are you satisfied with that response or the response given?
The truth is no. In an institution that is ruled by two leading parties, they're doing everything in their power to get rid of us as a tripartite joiner. How can I trust anything they say? Until that system is depoliticized, I have no faith in them. Look at nomination day. Instead of the normal procedures and the time that nomination day should have been at, they put it 51 or 52 days before instead of the normal protocol. Look at how GCOM told us that first come, first serve on nomination day. And we were lined up there for 3 days in advance. And when we got there to step in, APNU's name was there, and they told us it's above their protocol or their orders. They can't do anything about it. And Election Commission turned a blind eye towards us. So there's nothing they can say that's going to satisfy me right now until the APNU and the PPP do not have a say in our election commission.
And that's a good point there, Asha. What I want to ask is this. Based on what the report you're getting there, I'm in New York, the four of you is in Guyana. I think that the Elections Commission is not prepared, or at this point in time, it doesn't seem as if they might give a free and fair election. The thing is, as Mr. Ramkarran said, the chairman, being a former judge, she's one person, but she has to work with a team, and I think the team is tainted. And will they perform on Monday? We'll have to wait and see. My question to you guys is this. You are here tonight because you're in this Joinder list. Again, the Elections Commission misrepresent this Section 22 of the Representation of People Act. It actually says the fact was March 2nd is election. You had until February 6th to submit that Joinder list. They had you rushing to get it done in January, which was totally incorrect, because apparently nobody in the commission seemed to know what is going on there, and that's a concern. But talking about the Joinder list, how will this work in terms of the allocation of top-up seat and geographic seat? Mr. Ramkarran, we can start with you.
Well, that is exactly the question. That and other issues that are the questions we need to be answered by GCOM. Well, not only as I said, there are no laws. GCOM must give us an idea of how they're thinking so that we may make a contribution, come to a decision, all of us, because that is how this has to work, since there are no laws. I don't know, I believe that the idea is that we will each get our votes counted separately, and then the votes will be added together, and then the seats will be allocated to the combination of votes as one unit. But that's only my view. I don't know how GCOM is thinking about it and what ideas they have as to how
Let me step in there, Mr. Ramkarran, to assist you. Today I asked Mr. Lowenfield, Asha Kissoon, as a matter of fact, asked, and I was there, when he was totally unaware that there was an agreement between you guys, because he was waiting for a document of agreement between the three parties. And basically what he's saying is the law prescribes that you can decide that you want to be a joinder, and you are the individuals who decide how that is going to work out, whether it's the maths of the votes and how they're going to add and so on. But it still remains, the fact still remains, you and GCOM, the joinder parties and GCOM will have to agree, because GCOM will have to pass on this information to returning officers or the people who tabulating the votes, who would have never experienced this before and know how to deal with this. So they would have to talk to you before, right? But GCOM, Mr. Lowenfield, is basically saying is the onus is upon you guys to present the method.
Well, we have, so we have presented the method in, well, partially at least, in our agreement, in our memorandum of understanding. The question, you raised a very important point here. The question is whether the people who have the authority to announce the results or to determine the results of the elections are the returning officers, because they count the ballots for their district, which is in the region, ballots for the district, and then they certify it and they announce it, and they're the authority to do that. Question is whether they're the people who are going to count the votes for the parties and have and add them up for the join the parties and then add them up and announce them, or whether this will be done at some other level like the GCOM level. That is what we don't know and we want some clarification on. That and other things.
Asha, you're going to say something?
Yes, that's the importance of meeting with GCOM, because we need to clarify this before election day. I don't want a scenario, and I'm sure none of us want a scenario, where the votes are put together and we can't come to a conclusion on how we're sharing our seats because GCOM isn't in one step with us. So we need to meet them before. This needs to be sorted out before votes are casted.
Well, before
Mr. Ramkarran,
Lenox come on, sorry, critic. Before Lenox come on.
I mean,
Mr. Ramkarran, the section 22 is very clear. It says the joiner list is for the purpose of seat allocation. So, as you said, you rightly said, all the votes are counted for the three parties separately, and then for the purpose of seat allocation, they are now merged as in one unit. Is that what you're thinking of, Lenox?
Absolutely. I was going to go to section 22 to clarify the very same thing there, Charles. And I would caution my colleagues, Dr. Kissoon and Mr. Ramkarran, that we do not expose what we have drafted to GCOM's discretion. Based on their previous action, it seems as though if we are to expose our agreement to their discretion, that we stand to lose as a joiner. I think they have not shown the kind of integrity as an institution to give us that opportunity to be able to do some of these things.
I will get in and explain a little bit. There was a meeting at Palm Court with the Press Association of Guyana, and Mr. Lowenfield was present. What he said to us when we asked him about it is that GCOM cannot tell us how to do the joiner, but because it's the first time it's ever done in Guyana, they would like to see how it's done before elections, so after elections, no confusion would be between them and us. Today, when we spoke to him, what they said is that the votes will be put together and a total number given out. That would not be in the benefit of the joiner, because we, according to our agreement, need to see how many votes each party got before we can put them together. So in a matter of speaking, as much as they are not fair to us, we still need some cooperation with them in order to go forward in our joiner.
Well, from what Asha is saying, it appears as if Mr. Lowenfield is putting the burden on us. But the reality is that the people who allocate seats is GCOM. We don't allocate seats to ourselves. GCOM allocates seats. So at some point in time, GCOM has to decide how it's going to allocate seats and on what basis.
And the tabulation, if I were to jump in there, the tabulation of results has to come complete and separate. Whatever is TMNs, then they have to be in receipt of that final number. Same at ANOG and same at the Liberty and Justice Party. You cannot simply take our collective votes and lump them together, because how do we know which areas we performed in? How do we know which areas we might have won? And how do we know what components of the votes are left over? I think GCOM has to come clean on that and ensure that all of the results are disaggregated, and then it is for us to tally them together after to determine how we move forward.
Exactly, and this is what Mr. Lowenfield has not been able to make clear to us, and this is why we're requesting a meeting with him.
But Asha, gentlemen, that is what the law says. It should be tabulated separately, and when that is done, then you add for the purpose of seat allocation.
We're quite aware, but unfortunately in this country, the law is not always upheld.
Well, that we know for sure. Gentlemen, before critics come in on a question, let us move on to governance. It appears to me as though what we have heard of GCOM, that GCOM need to be reformed. I had Mr. Timothy Jonas on this program not so long ago, and his recommendation was that every commission, every constitutional commission, every board, everything the government has a hand in, should be 2 PPP personnel, 2 PNC personnel, and 1 from the larger small parties to be in each board. Is that something that all 3 of you agree to, or that you will plan to do in a new constitutional reform that the country badly needs? Actually, shaking your head. Go on first.
Listen, I'm quite aware that in other countries there are systems where political parties are involved in the election commission. However, we're of the opinion that because of the corruption level in Guyana, GCOM should not have any board member that is associated with a political party. It needs to be completely separate from the politics and from the parties that it is taking care of. And that's our opinion.
Is that
Mr. Ramkarran, can you
GCOM alone, or all commissions that the government controls?
Specifically GCOM right now.
Okay.
Mr. Ramkarran, with your experience, tell us how will that work? Would it be an advantage or a disadvantage to the election commission?
Well, I have been a strong supporter of the current structure of the Elections Commission for a very long time, since the establishment of the commission. I felt that the political parties or the persons who, the main political or the parties in parliament are concerned about elections. It's in their interest, and they're the best people to determine how the elections are run. Incidentally, as a diversion, I remember when the United Force was in the parliament in the opposition in the years when Mr. Hoyt was alive. I remember he used to consult with the United Force and the other small parties. At one time there was the WPA and so on. But it was when the United Force was, the time when the United Force was in the opposition, the main small opposition, was the time when vacancies occurred in the commission. And I remember that he consulted with Mr. Nadir of the United Force. So that was how it operated at the time. But I have come to the view, especially since 2001 after I left, with the kind of inability of the two political parties to agree on any single thing, that the time has come to review the structure of the election commission with a view to removing political representation. Now, some people say, and it is a fact, that it will be very difficult to get civic society people, independent people, to run these commissions. But there are a lot of people, I mean, who are around and who would be prepared to serve on something like the elections commission. So I think the time has come to remove politics from the work of the elections commission. You find 6 people, 6 independent people, and let them find a 7th for the chair.
Ralph, I have to disagree with you on one point. There is an agreement, there is a point of agreement on the Elections Commission, and that point of agreement was to remove Lenox Shuman as a candidate. So I just wanted to correct you on that point. But I understand.
How did you have 2 political parties having
a duopoly,
a contestant at the elections, taking a decision against one contestant? They're all contestants. I mean, how fair is that? How transparent is that?
Mr. Ramkarran, please help me out here. I need you to put something in perspective for me. You were once the supporter, a staunch supporter of this process. Is it as a result of you learning that is a failed process and always has been a failed process that you seek to have a new arrangement? Or is it as a result of you being disadvantaged now, not being with the PPP or on an outside party? Clear that up for me, please.
No, at the end of the 2015 election, I had a long conversation. The idea had been brewing in my mind for some time. And at the end of the 2015 elections, I had a visit from Steve Sursbali, who's an old friend. And Steve sought to persuade me that this structure of the Elections Commission is not going to work. It's not going to work for long. And he's having great difficulty with it. And he is an experienced chairman. He was on the job long. To agreeing with us, he wanted me to, use access to the press to promote society. I never did, but I came around since 2015 to review that the time has come to review the structure of the Elections Commission. It's not because I am now involved. No.
In light,
Critic, let me jump in there for a sec. I have to agree with Ralph to a great extent and with Asha in depoliticizing the system. I don't think that political parties should be represented on Constitutional Commission, because when we do go through a constitutional reform process, what happened to the people who are intending on running as independents in some of these constituencies? That would mean that they would not be represented on these commissions. And I think the depoliticization of these commissions, all of them, and all boards and such, should be the way to go. And governance, much like culture, is an evolutionary process. So what existed back in the day for GCOM and what was necessary for the PNC-PPP divide, or to bridge that divide, is no longer relevant and necessary in this day and age. Guyana has grown beyond that, and we need to recognize that and ensure that the governance structures that we have or that we are putting in place addresses not only the immediate, but also the future needs of our country. And it is time that we started to look in that direction.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is serious. You guys are all in private practice. If you had a staff like GCOM running your business, would you be happy with that performance? They have done so bad, and yet they're reappointed to the position that they hold. What is really going on? Are we giving, it's okay that nothing is wrong, that you can continue what you're doing, knowing that all GCOM has to do, get a voters list ready, prepare for elections, and run an election on election day. What is so difficult about it?
Polishing this thing, I think you're polishing this thing a little too much. At this time, if it were a business, it would have been bankrupt. You understand? There would have been foreclosure. The properties of this business would have been up for auction to pay back people for damages.
We got to change. GCOM needs to be changed. And the good news is that what I'm getting the news out of Guyana is that this Joinder group parties will get quite a bit of seats. I think they're looking at maybe 5-6 seats. If that happened and the Guyanese people was watching us tonight, please tell your friends and family, vote for this Joinder list, because you guys in Parliament can transform Guyana. And GCOM, as Asha said, is the first one to be transformed.
Just for clarity, and a lot of times, too many times, we don't go over the educational process, and people be looking and they don't know what's going on. I want to start, we could go from Asha to Shuman to Mr. Ramkarran, and you guys just quickly put forward, your name again and what part you represent and how that came about. And then we'll ask Mr. Ramkarran to explain the Joinder and how that works. We want to start with you, Asha. Quickly, TNM, its purpose, its logo, what that would look like, where people could put their election time. Let's start with you.
Okay, I'm Asha Kissoon. I'm the presidential candidate of the New Movement. The New Movement was principally formed because a group of youth came together saying that we want sincere and positive change in Guyana. For too long, young people have been made promises that are never fulfilled. The last election, we were told to vote like a boss, and we ended up voting like clowns instead. The purpose of the New Movement was to have youth having a voice in Parliament, to bring more young people forward, and specifically issues that affect our nation. A big part of what we stand for is unity, national unity, unity in politics, and unity among the people of Guyana, because race-based politics has been plaguing us for 54 years. Our symbol specifically is a harpy eagle, because that is native to Guyana, and it signifies the magnificence of an eagle, rising above adversity and striving in adversity. And that's basically what we're about.
TNM, the New Movement.
And the symbol is the eagle, right?
Yes, it's a harpy eagle.
Well, the Liberty and Justice Party was the first, I think the first or second party, the first party to launch, which was in January of 2019, January 12th. And when we launched this party, it is out of the absence of care and compassion for the people of Guyana. It doesn't matter if you're PPP, PNC, AFC, TUF, or anyone. What we know is that 54 years has not produced the kind of future that were promised to people time and time again. And worst off, we have a massive, massive marginalized population and people who live in poverty. And our drive is to ensure that there is equity and justice in the system. Equity so that every single Guyanese, regardless of where you live, you have equal opportunity and equal access to every single thing that exists on the coast. Our logo is just two hands shaking, and it looks like this. I don't know if you can see that.
Two hands.
Maybe the camera is not doing it
Two hands
justice.
shaking.
I don't know. The camera is bad.
Yeah, we saw it. We saw it.
Right? You can see that, right? Now it is hands because you need hands to hold the cup. You need hands to turn the keys. You need hands to plant the trees. You need hands to cooperate to build the country, and that is why we chose two hands.
Mr. Ramkarran.
A new and united Guyana was established because of the failure of the AFC to honor their election promise to establish constitutional reform, to establish constitutional reform in order to propose a shared governance system in Guyana. That the person getting the highest votes would be the president. The person getting the second highest votes would become the prime minister. And all parties obtaining 30% and over of the votes would have a place in government in proportion to their votes. They abandoned that promise. It is as a result of that that several of us came together and decided that that is the solution. Not problems, but the basic solution to the divisions which have plagued our society, the political divisions, and to a large extent the ethnic division that have plagued our society. And we believe that the writing of letters, the writing of articles, symposiums, speeches, civil society activity are no longer sufficient to persuade, to speed up this process. We felt the only way that that can be done was to enter in Parliament, to try to secure a situation where neither party wins an absolute majority, and where we and now we and our allies obtain enough seats to keep the parties that power. We'll be able to ensure the constitutional reform takes place. Local phone and ANOG is the top of the list. It's the first party on the list, and our logo is a cell phone. And this is it here. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah.
Cell phone is there. So that is our
Charles,
Critic, let me just jump in there for a quick sec, right? For the viewers that are looking at us, and we hope that if we are not represented on the ballot in your area, that you take a look at the new movement and you vote for the new movement. If the new movement is not represented, that you take a look and vote for ANOG. And likewise, in areas that they're not represented, and if you want to vote for either of those two parties and we are on the ballot, vote for the Liberty and Justice Party. Because at the end of the day, all of us share that common vision, and we will at some point end up sharing the votes to ensure that you are represented.
Excellent point.
Likewise, if we are not on the ballot, we are encouraging people to vote for one or the other of our two allies who are on the list.
And the same stands for the new movement. It is indeed a unity for the first time in Guyana.
Charles, you want to take a next line of questioning from here?
Yes, and that's the good news about, the good news is that I think a lot of the Guyanese voters now, I think quite a bit has gone independent. I know in previous election there was about maybe 8 to 10%, we're hoping if that margin increased by 15%, then I think the three of you, your parties, will have quite a bit of vote from the Guyanese people.
What you're talking about, Charles, the interest in sword forces?
Yes.
A sword force?
Yes, yes.
Well, that is we recently did a poll, and that is at 1/3 of the population. It showed that 32% of the people, just under 1/3, 32% of people were looking at new parties as an option.
Wow, that is even better than I thought.
Charles, let me jump in there. And for the viewers, once again, if you look back at history and look at the history of politics in Guyana, I want to ask you this very simple question. Are you living the future that was promised by both the PNC and the PPP? We still continue to struggle from blackouts. We still have a huge amount of
Please, Mr. Shuman,
population.
please do that. I can't go to blackout now.
All right, I want to get into a new topic.
We have a lot of people who are still not able to access the education system. A lot of people who still cannot access Medicare. A lot of people who don't have the necessary infrastructure in their neighborhoods. We have high crime. And what we are seeing right now in one of the political parties is that they're promoting arguably one of the most incompetent ministers in the history of Guyana to be a prime ministerial candidate. That is not the Guyana that we want. And we have seen what 23 years would have done to this country. And I want everyone to sit there and ask, is what you have seen over the history of Guyana, that 54 years, are you willing to sit down and look at Guyana with going through the same 54 years again, because that is all that those two political parties are going to offer us, and maybe much worse.
And I'm glad you said that, because that's my question. My next topic, I want to talk about security. Guyanese at home and abroad are very, very scared. I am originally from the West Bank in La Grange, and people tell me at 6 o'clock, when it's dark, they close their doors and they're gone indoors. We have heard Guyanese overseas who want to come back home. They are so fearful of the security arrangement. The question is, the last election, APNU did promise the people, listen, we have the knowledge, we have the wherewithal, we can solve this problem. In some quarters, many believe the security problem got worse. What will your party do for the people of Guyana should they give you opportunity to represent them in Parliament? Asha, we can start with you.
Well, I need a short follow-up question. Do you mean specifically what we're doing for election day and then eventually in Parliament, or just specifically after Parliament?
Security for the nation after election.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So the new movement has pledged that ultimately by raising the economy, of course the crime rate in the country would go down. But on a short-term basis, we notice that there's a lot of corruption in the police force. The first step to fix that would be by raising the police officers' salaries, better training for them, because we notice that Guyana has one of the poorest police training systems and training course in the world, body camera for security officers, surveillance systems in each community, and more so holding accountable criminals that are caught. I can use myself as an example. I was robbed a few weeks ago. I identified the persons who robbed me. The police have not arrested them simply because they're relatives of police officers and soldiers, and nobody is held accountable. And sadly, since this situation happened and I made it public, many people, hundreds of people have come to me and let me understand that the same thing is happening to them in this system. So going forward, and the steps I outlined to you, I think that would play a big part in fixing the general security system in Guyana.
Lenox, let's go to them and come to Mr. Ramkarran.
Charles, I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the candidates from the party was actually robbed not too long ago. I think her name is Dr. Leong. Imagine that you are contesting these elections and you are running in a country where the dominant political party, I'd say, that is in charge of security cannot secure the very candidates that are contesting these elections. Added to that, you are promoting arguably the most incompetent Minister of Public Security in the country to become the prime ministerial candidate. Added to what Asha is saying, what we intend on doing is transforming the force into a meritocracy. We need to set minimum standards. You cannot just come out of high school and go into policing. What we want to do is to ensure that all of these police officers move on to get a university degree and then reintegrate into the force, and obviously better compensate them. When you start to do that, you are going to see a transformation in the system. You're going to see a transformation in the force. When we incorporate technology with the knowledge that we are going to put in the streets, we also intend on coupling that with what I'd say a revised justice system. And I'm sure Ralph would probably be very well versed in what reviews or stuff needs to be dealt with at the justice system level. But I think when you put all of those things in a package, it is not a single silver bullet that will address the crime situation, because obviously employment and poverty plays a massive, massive role in crime. The fact that we don't have infrastructure to support police patrols, some streets you're giving them a car that is inadequate to go off-roading in the city. The streets are not lit. So we have to ensure that it is an all-encompassing solution that would take care of the people's security. Now, when we talk about the nation's security, we have a massive, massive amount of our borders that are insecure. We have the sindicatos and the FARC that are infiltrating our boundaries and borders every single day, and the military is not up to that task because we have not equipped them. And when they start smuggling guns into this country and they make it into our streets, then we have no way to address that. And we have no one but the political leaders of the day to blame for that, because they have the capacity to ensure that there is proper budgeting for all of these people to do their jobs and do it effectively, but yet they continue to fail us. I think, once again, it is a multifaceted approach that we have to do to address the security in this country.
Mr. Ramkarran?
Well, I agree with the sentiments which have been expressed by my colleagues, and hopefully in the near future we'll have the resources to spend on the police and do all the things that both Asha and Lenox have proposed. One of the main ways in which crime is solved is by intelligence-driven crime fighting. And in our broken society, intelligence is limited, because when there is a PNC government in office, the Indian population do not cooperate, do not give up criminals from their community. When there is PPP government in office, the African population does not cooperate. For example, during the PPP's terms of office, they had an elaborate system of local community policing. But none of those local community policing groups were ever formed in African-dominated areas of Guyana. The whole local policing community groups have now collapsed because a government is in force which does not encourage them. Now, community policing is very important because it allows the development of local intelligence to identify criminals. Now, many of the home invasions take place because people in the local community who are known identify the places and then bring in the bandits. Now, those can be given up easily and have a huge impact on the reduction of crime. Or if you look all the crimes that where people are captured, who are guilty of home invasion, are people from outside the communities. How do they know where to go to a particular house? How do they know which particular house they can attack? And how do they know about the security available on each occasion? So that is the way in which unless political problem is resolved in Guyana, you will have a continuing problem with crime and corruption.
Charles, I want to have the presidential candidates of the Joinder address this issue. From the year 2000 onward, where there was what is considered by this government the dark period, and claims are made that 400 odd youngsters, black youths, were murdered. I think people fail to remember how this began. This actually began with criminals killing police. Then after giving birth to a phantom squad, which went after criminals and allowed a whole drug dealing operation to thrive. Now, on top of all of that, have we forgotten that the beginning and end of all these things had some bit of some political authors in them? The prison breaks and everything behind that. The two main political parties have been accusing one another. So there's some bit of fact in whatever propaganda they put out there. Have you guys looked past that completely? That being in Parliament, you would have to contend with this issue as it relates to politicians creating unsettling environment. How do you deal with that?
Well, you know, the PNC up to AFC has prominently proposed that they will conduct an inquiry into the deaths of these 400 persons. And they have failed to do so. And they, excuse me. And they had the opportunity because the PPP said, we welcome an inquiry into these killings, but nothing has happened. So after the PNC has failed to carry out their promise of having an inquiry, the talk itself about these 400 people have quieted down. But the Stabrook News carried out a survey by itself. Now that can't be a scientific survey, that's a journalistic survey. But its findings were very significant. Of the 400 people, at 400 plus, they found that 130, there were 135 unexplained deaths. 35 of the people were policemen. 100 or 200, remember the exact figure, were victims of criminal activities, robbery and shootings of that sort. So that is the best we have. And it is true that there were these allegations of political involvement, killings and criminal. But the best way to resolve that would have been a public inquiry, and that has not taken place. But there's still time to do so.
Well, I think one of the big issue is that the PNC cannot investigate the PPP and the PPP cannot investigate the PNC. It is because both of them are culpable. When you listen to the recording of Winston Felix and what he would have said on that tape when he was a commissioner of police, now he's on the other side of the fence from the PPP. So there is nothing that is going to come of it. And I think what we need literally in Parliament is the independent center that would be able to hold both of these political parties to account. I mean, when you look at what happened and what continues to happen in Guyana, the PPP cannot come and say anything about the APNU AFC or the PNC because they themselves did the very same thing. And vice versa. So the only way to address this is to ensure that we have an independent center that can address both of these sides.
Okay, before Asha, sorry, Mr. Ramkarran.
It's quite laughable to see that the PPP accused the President Granger of appealing to the police, to the discipline forces to vote. And it was published on Facebook a statement by the PPP just before the discipline services vote in the 2000 in
2015.
2011 or 2015 elections of President then President Ramkarran calling on the discipline services, telling them how to vote, asking them for their vote. The PVP accused the President Grange of campaigning by wearing a green shirt. Somebody posted on Facebook Donald Ramotar at around the same time wearing a red shirt. So, I mean, they're both
Okay, Mr.
equally
Ramkarran.
guilty of
Okay,
what the
we
other.
got 5 minutes more in the program. So 5 minutes between the three of you. Asha, we start with you. Why should the Guyanese electorate vote for the new movement? Tell them what you plan to do in 2 minutes and why you should get their vote.
I'll go further to talk about the importance of a new party, particularly the joiner of list sitting before you. It is time to end 54 years of old politics in Guyana. We're tired of the corruption and what is going on. And if you're considering supporting a new party, please consider the joiner. More especially that we have ensured that no votes will be wasted. And even more, we have ensured that this is not another scenario of AFC, because in our memorandum of understanding, we have signed that at no point will we be joining with the APNU AFC or the PPP to support them to have a majority in Parliament. The solution to the question that you just asked earlier is sitting before you right now. As a third-party joiner, at no point will we hide any corruption done by PPP or APNU, and we will go forward fighting for the benefit of the Guyanese people and not just ourselves. So thank you very much.
Mr. Ramkarran,
Quickly,
why
sure.
should the people vote for a new and united Guyana?
I think the people should vote for a new and united Guyana because we're offering a solution to the perpetual political gridlock that has existed in Guyana since 1957. Guyana is a country with two large ethnic groups. And in societies like Guyana with large ethnic groups, there's some rare exceptions. They mostly have political instability, which arises from the fact that these two ethnic groups support different political parties. It happened in Northern Ireland, it happened has happened in Fiji, it happened in African countries, Kenya is one of them, and so on. So we are proposing a resolution of the political problem. It's not going to be easy to reconcile the people. Generally, as we all know, Guyanese live in peace and harmony all year round. But because of the political instability resulting from these two parties supporting two large political parties, Guyana has been left back. People do not invest here. Outside do not invest here because of the risk insurance. We have periodic violence and these kinds of things. So, to begin the solution of that problem, we are proposing that we have constitutional reform in which the two main political parties are equally represented. Unless you have equal representation, it will not work. And in a small cabinet, which allows one person to serve as president for 1 year. We have every ethnic group in Ghana having women and youth. So that's our proposal, and we seek your
Thank you very much.
where we're not present, we ask one or other of our president. We promise, as Asha mentioned, that we will not join with any other political party to give them a majority.
Thank you. Mr.
Shuman,
Shuman, why should the people vote for your party?
In order for us to have the kind of society that we want in Guyana, we cannot continue to subscribe to political parties that continue to violate the Constitution of Guyana. Both of them did it for 2 decades and having dual citizens sit in parliament, and yet now they are trying to attack Lenox. There is only one future that Guyana will thrive under, and that is a future that is absent of the PPP and the PNC as majority political parties. In the areas where the Liberty and Justice Party is not present, we are encouraging all of our supporters to vote for the new movement or vote for a new and united Guyana. And I want to say to my PPP brothers and sisters and APNU AFC brothers and sisters and all of them, look at what history has done to us and look at what we have experienced over 23 years and over the last 5 years. And you know of the integrity of Mr. Ramkarran, you know of the integrity of Dr. Asha Kissoon, and you know what the Liberty and Justice Party stands for. And if you're to continue to subscribe to the PPP and the PNC or APNU AFC, what you are doing is subscribing to the history that Guyana has had for the last 54 years. When we talked about free education on January 12, 2019, no one seemed to want to pick that up, except now it seems like the PPP and the PNC want to champion that. When we talked about respecting the rights of peoples in Guyana, they had no interest in that, except now that the Liberty and Justice Party is on scene, that they want to champion that. When I came out on January 12th and said that I'm going to renounce my citizenship, that is when they found a way to maybe try to prosecute Sharon Das for being a dual citizen. Had we not done that, the constitutional violation would have continued. In order for Guyana to transform, it has to be in a society where the people are liberated and there is justice that prevails. And I am hoping that all of the people who are intelligent enough out there will look at the Liberty and Justice Party, look at the new movement, look at a new and united Guyana, and decide that the future for Guyana is a lot brighter without a PPP or a PNC majoritarian rule.
And I have my co-host, Critics. Interestingly, where do you get that 1/3 of Guyanese in which one of the polls who did that poll to say 1/3 of Guyanese?
Well, I actually conducted the poll on my Facebook page, and I can tell you, nobody can dispute the fact that the Guyanese Critic Facebook page is a representation of Guyana. There are 172,000 followers to date, and they come from the PPP, the PNC. Nobody can dispute that, because the Guyanese Critic Morning Live is the most viewed program in the Caribbean. And 30% of the people on that page, a little less than 30%, are from the diaspora, right? So mostly Guyanese, and it spreads across as to relating to the races, the political parties. You can safely say, if there's any place you can get a fair representation of how Guyanese are thinking and how they're feeling, is on the Guyanese Critic page, because of its unbiased approach to news in Guyana and responding to issues affecting Guyanese.
Excellent. You want to say a closing remark, quick, before we go?
Well, I want to thank you for affording me this opportunity to co-host with you. I want to make a special plea to Guyanese. March the 2nd, you will be afforded the opportunity to make a decision that is going to change your life. And I can tell you, there is a quest or a request by the government to continue the progress. And today I'm walking on the road, and I'm seeing some people laid in green with the green jerseys. And I'm thinking, wow, it's unfortunate that they personally have not progressed one day in their life, but they are supporting to continue, are purporting to follow up and continue the progress. And you see this with the people wearing the red also. Citizens, you have a unique opportunity here to look at Dr. Asha Kissoon from the new movement, young professional, to look at Mr. Lenox Shuman from the Liberty and Justice Party, not so young, but an airline pilot, a disciplined man, and to look at Mr. Ralph Ramkarran.
Not so young.
The youngest among us.
Yeah, right, who has quite a bit of an unblemished background in Guyanese politics, and as a lawyer, right? Today, Mr. Narayan Singh called and he was explaining that, look at Mr. Ramkarran's age. And I said, putting outside of the age, of which is similar to that of the president, putting outside of the age, please name one other thing that could bring disrepute to the credibility of Mr. Ramkarran. And Sis safely said, man, there is nothing. So you have to look at these three parties and know that you're affording yourself an opportunity for fair representation in the Parliament of Guyana, actually for the first time in Guyana. And again, I want to beseech you to look at them as viable options and think wisely and have employ critical thinking when making your decision on March the 2nd. Look for the eagle, look for the cell phone, and look for the shake hand and put your X next to it. Thank you again, Mr. Charles, for affording me this opportunity to play a part in GlobeSpan.
Well said, critics. I don't think anybody can put it better than that. That's beautifully put. So again, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Kissoon, Mr. Ramkarran, and Mr. Shuman, we want to wish you all the best on Monday, and we look forward when we get the results. We will be here live on GlobeSpan 24/7 with the election results as they come in. There will be analysis here in the program. So we can ask you to feed to us the information you're getting so we can make it known to the guys.
Not only as they come in, Charles, not only as they come in, as Mr. Lenox Shuman, Miss Asha Kissoon, and Miss Ramkarran are told how many seats are allotted to them.
Excellent. So Mr. Critic will also hopefully be on that analysis. So together we can share with the guys, people.
We'll be live all day election day. We will be live.
And we are hoping that 1/3 you talk about are really the independent voters, and they vote for these three parties: the New Movement, a New and United Guyana, and Liberty and Justice Party. Gentlemen and lady, thank you so much.
Charles, before you wrap up, and for the viewers, I think we had reached out to Mr. Ramkarran and Dr. Kissoon about the 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, right on GlobeSpan here at myself and the Critic. And if Mr. Ramkarran and Dr. Kissoon wants to join us, please come on, let's have a discussion. Last one before we roll into elections.
I'll try to be there, but I'll have to be in Orbis tomorrow. Please.
But again, Guyanese,
All right, thank you.
Mr. Nohar Singh and Devin, we want to thank you guys so much for this program tonight. And for the viewers here from New York and there in Guyana, good night. And we'll see you tomorrow morning with Critic and Mr. Shuman and maybe Dr. Kissoon and Mr. Ramkarran as they continue the discussion to convince you that these are the people you need to vote for come Monday. God bless Guyana and God bless all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Critic. Good night.